In today's episode,
when we got that offer, we knew that number one, it was a very interesting, acquisition in 2 years. For our investors, it was over 10x.
yeah,
So very good
10x return for them.
Yeah, it's a 10x return for them, and we also knew that Zulily was going to raise a lot more. They could raise a lot more when it was becoming, it was becoming a lot of money for our investors and very difficult for them to follow. So we wanted to take that offer, and they actually prevented that acquisition to happen and used their veto right. And a lot of our investors told us, you gotta tell your investors that you're leaving unless you guys are selling, and we didn't get the balls to do that. So we actually fucked it up. We didn't, we should have played it differently, and we should have sold, and that was a big mistake.
Christophe, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Good to see you, man.
You're one of
Always.
my old school, I mean, as much as I can say old school, I've been in New York for 6 years, but I've known you for most of the time I've been here. I can't remember actually when we met, but I think, was it Daniel Glazer? I think he introduced us, who is a
In
lawyer.
one of those events, yeah.
Yeah, we met at one of those events and became friends. And I was just saying before we start recording this, that you're the embodiment of entrepreneur. Like when I introduce people to you, I normally say like, look, this is my French entrepreneur friend. And I don't always, even other people that I know have started companies, it doesn't feel as authentic as it does with you, because whenever I meet you, when we're talking about stuff, like you're always really interested in what's going on you and like the happenings of the startup world, but also, you've got broader range of interest too. And this kind of, we're based in New York. I also want to say, actually, we're being hosted today by Canal Street Market and Listing Party. So thanks for those guys for hosting us today. But we've been living here. We're both Europeans that landed in the States, right? And we've both got this common interest. And just going back 2-3 years, we were having this amazing dinner. It was in Koreatown.
Yep,
we just
I
had this,
remember.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot who, there was a third person.
There was a third person
I
with
forgot
us, yeah.
who that was, but it was one of your friends, from one of your French friends, I think. And we were just having this great evening, like anyone listening to this has hopefully had with their friends and family. But we ended up starting to talk about your old company that you had called Totsy. Am I saying it right?
Yeah,
Totsy?
Totsy, yeah.
Right, Totsy.
That's right.
And so we're going to get into that whole story in a minute, but I just want to fast forward to this one moment that you said, and it was like, I had this $100 million offer for the company, right? And I remember close to $100 million, and this is 20, what year is this?
This is 2011.
Oh, 2011, okay.
2011, yeah.
Okay, and so, at that point, to be honest, this is before I had the podcast, and I'd met some entrepreneurial friends, but I didn't know many people, and even now I don't know that many people that have ever been in a position to have an offer on their company for that amount of money. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And you told me all the details of it. So we're going to go into some of the stories from that today.
And how we fucked it up.
Yeah,
sure.
Well, that's all right, man. That's part of the journey, and it's part of like the learning, right? So like, take me to that moment first of all. Like describe to me what it was like in that moment, being in the boardroom. Where were you? What was going on when you got that offer?
Well, we were 2 years in. We're building this business with my co-founder, Guillaume was the CEO. I was the chief marketing officer. And the company was 27 months old when we got that offer from Groupon, who was trying to get into the goods.
And actually, sorry, Totsy, could you just explain what it is first? Because I realized we didn't say.
Yeah, actually, that's a good idea. Well, Totsy was a flash sale company focused on the family market, on the family vertical. So we're selling everything for baby, kids, pregnant moms, from clothing, shoes, and strollers and car seats, etc. Everything discounted. We were one of the biggest discount website for the family. And we had one competitor called Zulily on the other side of the country, based in Seattle. And we knew these guys were not only heavily funded by some very, very large investors, but also a lot more experienced than what we were. We were at our first real, VC-backed company. I had a couple businesses before, but never raised, such an amount of money. And
how much had you raised?
We had raised like $7 or $8 million
at that
plus
time.
Plus $2 or $3 million in debt from Silicon Valley Bank. The company was 2 years old, and we were on $2.5 million a month MRR. So the company was on $30 million
run rate for the year.
Run rate.
Yeah.
On at the end of its second year. So the company was growing really, really fast. And when we got that offer it was over $80 million actually. And Groupon really wanted to get into the goods and not only selling coupons and services. And they needed to go to market very fast with that. So they were looking for a good acquisition target for it. And so when we got that offer, we knew that number one, it was a very interesting, acquisition in 2 years. For our investors, it was over 10x.
Yeah.
So very good
10x return for them.
Yeah. 10x return for them. And we also knew that Zulily was going to raise a lot more. They could raise a lot more when it was becoming, it was becoming a lot of money for our investors and very difficult for them to follow. So we wanted to take that offer, and they actually prevented that acquisition to happen and used their veto right. And a lot of our investors told us, you gotta tell your investors that you're leaving unless you guys are selling, and we didn't get the balls to do that. So we actually fucked it up. We didn't, we should have played it differently, and we should have sold, and that was a big mistake. And eventually, what we were afraid would happen happened, and Zulily raised over $350 million at a crazy valuation, and basically killed us by doing a lockout strategy. They were buying a lockout strategy. Lockout. So they're basically buying all the available inventory of goods that were on the market, who were a discount website. So the available inventory was limited, and so we had we didn't have enough product assortment on the website, and they were also going after all the good acquisition channels of traffic. So all our acquisition of users went through the roof.
Yeah.
So
the cost of it.
Fires everywhere.
Okay.
Cost of acquisition of customers going through the roof. Not enough inventory on the website, and it was very difficult to fight. We eventually raised another $35 million from our existing investors, but it was not enough to fight against like $400 million in front of us, and a lot more time to market.
Okay. And so you mentioned you had that run rate of $30 million run rate for the year revenue
at that time.
At that moment of the acquisition offer.
It didn't stay.
Yeah. And you had about 5 million members, I think.
We had 5 million moms on the website.
Yeah. So this is significant. I've had people on the show that are like bootstrapped, who are trying to build something, own 100%, which is great in its own way. But there are some markets, and this has come up a lot in the last few weeks. I had someone from Primary Ventures on recently, VC, and there is a time when you need to maybe raise money. Like if you're trying to build Uber and you're trying to compete and grow at that scale, it's very hard to bootstrap that because it's a winner-take-all market and all that sort of stuff. So I think just for the listeners, like that's why, when I had this conversation with you, I remember saying to you, man, like this, we were going into this crazy story, like even just talking about being in the boardroom. I remember you said like the CFO from Groupon called or something like that, and Andrew Mason was in the room or something, who was the founder of Groupon. And at that time, for people that are maybe a little younger or weren't involved in that world back then, like they were the hot company.
They were the hot company.
Yeah.
And they were good guys too.
Yeah.
Really
really? All right, that's good to hear.
Really good guys.
In Chicago, they were based.
We flew to Chicago with my co-founder to meet both the CFO, who was an ex-Google, I don't remember his name, and Andrew Mason. And in the room also were a couple of the the street deal guys with the Samuel brothers from Rocket Internet, who had they had recently merged Groupon with Street Deal in Europe and became that global company. So one of the Samuel brothers from Rocket Internet was also in the room, and there was a very good energy in that room where we felt that it was a very, very good match for us to become a part of something much bigger. When we knew that Zulily was going to grow really, really big, and we couldn't really fight against them, but it is what it is.
It is, yeah. But I think the reason I wanted to have this conversation and also, to be honest, I probably couldn't have this conversation with anyone. Like, we know each other. I'm not trying to like trip you up or like get some crazy story from you. Like, I'm just trying to have a real talk that no one talks about. Like, people don't get to have these conversations. You hear the hit piece articles that, I'm not going to say names of publications, but they will write, this is what happened. But that's not hearing from the people that went through it. And I think often people, especially in the business world and the startup world, we just hear about these crazy success stories all the time, but we don't hear about, like you were saying, 90% of companies don't make it. And the timing is a big part of this. So at that moment, if you guys had agreed and your investors had agreed, that would have been on paper a great outcome, and
Absolutely.
then you might have been there for a few years and done something else, right? And if you don't mind me talking about the numbers, just because it's worth understanding for people, because I think it contextualizes what you then went through to then go and launch companies beyond, right? Like, you probably had, are you able to share like what percentage of equity you might have had as a founder, as a co-founder?
We had like 13 or 14% each left,
okay.
Me and my co-founder.
Okay, so that would have netted out to...
We were 3 co-founders, so we had like 14% each.
Okay,
yeah.
And then, so, just to make that tangible for people listening, if you get sold for 100 or 80 million, you'd be netting like 10 million each or something like that.
It's a little bit less, because it was, there was some preferred equity.
Preferred stock for the investors to get.
Less, the 8, and let's say 10 with the debt, so remain 70, and then, yes,
then
something like that's like more like 7 or something.
Okay,
but still 7 would have changed my life.
Of course, yeah. 100%. And the only reason, this isn't an exercise for me to be like, oh, big numbers. And, the reason I'm talking about this is because this is the real life of someone going through this for 20 years. You've been doing this, working for yourself,
years, yeah. 15
years, doing your own stuff, involved with so many different companies. You're still doing that today. So I just want to paint a picture of reality for people too, that sometimes this happens, and what the skill is really being able to come through that and then go to the next thing and to go to the next thing. Because the reality is 90% of companies are going to fail, especially in this high growth space. And a lot of the time there are things out of your control. Yeah, are there things you might have done differently looking back? Of course. And maybe we can go into some of those things in a bit. But to me, like, these are stories that don't always get talked about. So I just want to make sure, the intention for people listening is to learn from these sorts of stories, because ultimately, you can go to business school and learn in a textbook like this is how you grow a company. But the reason I do this is not because a few thousand people might listen and I might make a tiny amount of money from sponsorships and stuff like that. What I do this for is to learn, right? Like, and by having you as a friend, I've learned, but like to have this conversation, I can really learn, because by the time maybe I'm in that situation one day, or someone listening to this is, and they can say, okay, what were the things that I might have done differently? What are the thought process to go through? So that's kind of what we'll dive into in a second. So we talked about that, obviously it would have been life-changing exit for anyone to make that amount of money for all the hard work you've done. No one would want to take that away from you. Eventually you ended up raising more money, sold to another company, I think it was, for a lot less, right?
Oh, yeah. It was kind of a down round. We sold to a company called Bids in LA after raising a total of 42 for Totsy. We sold the company for 12, and obviously it was all preferred equity, so we sold 0.
Yeah. So that means for people trying to follow along, if they don't know what preferred stock is, so there's different types of ownership, right, or stock basically, and the investors, especially early investors,
they get their money first.
They get their money first, which makes sense.
They get their 42 million. They had to get that $42 million first,
and then
we sold for like 12 or 13.
So if there's nothing left, then everyone else leaves with it. And it's a similar. There's going to be another episode that probably would have been out by this point the founder of FanDuel, who I just had on.
Yeah.
They sold a similar story in a way. They were worth $1 billion at one point, I'm pretty sure, and they sold for $465 million to Paddy Power Betfair, and the founders, it's a legal thing going on, so I don't want to blow it up, but they essentially didn't make too much from that either, and there's a big dispute about that. But these are the stories you don't get to hear in
but
nuance.
That's most of the
that's
stories.
Part of the story, exactly.
That's most of the stories.
So that's kind of what happened. Zulily ended up growing, doing well, and I don't know they went public
for $2.3 billion valuation. And eventually QVC bought them for another $2.4 billion valuation. So they monetized twice.
That's crazy. So look, I don't want to be on a downer the whole conversation because there's lots of...
Can we talk about something else?
Yeah, we will. There's lots of great stuff to talk about. But just to kind of close that out, look, like if there were a few things you learned from that process, which I'm sure there were many, what was that like for you in terms of taking something positive out of that situation?
I mean, every learning experience when you build businesses is positive at the end of the day. It leaves maybe a little bit sour taste in our mouth, both my co-founder and I. But Totsy was a wonderful experience. We had an amazing team. We were inexperienced. We were inexperienced, and we were maybe a little bit cocky as well, and wanting to make our own decisions. We were well advised by some of our advisors and investors, and we should have taken those advices more seriously. We took them lightly, and it costed us a lot. It did cost us a lot, and that's the big, one of the big, I think the big learning for us both is to, take those advices in consideration a lot more. For the next,
how do you differentiate though? Because when you're in that situation, you're listening to people. First of all, you've partnered with investors in the first place. Like anyone who's invested in your company, you've already met, you've already decided to work together, and you obviously have a level of trust in the first place. And when you get to this decision where some of them want to sell, some of them don't want to sell, right? I think Fabrice was
This is very unusual. Fabrice was actually one of our investors.
Early investors, right?
Yeah,
So
Fabrice
he was a previous guest on the show.
Yeah. And he's actually one of our investors / advisors who told us, guys, be careful. You should tell them that you're leaving the company unless you can do the deal. And we should have followed those advices from Fabrice and a couple more who told us the same thing. We just need to get the balls to do it, honestly. And that was a huge mistake.
And when you say get the balls, like what was stopping?
We were afraid of saying to our investors, we're working out of our own business if we don't do this deal.
I get you.
Yeah. And the reality is that if you have the founders working out of the company, there is no more company. Yeah. And at the time, we were, young, inexperienced, and we, were afraid of doing that.
Yeah. How old were you at that point?
That was 10 years ago, so more than 10 years ago. So that was, I was 31, 32.
All right. So, you're not like 21, but you're someone that's still inexperienced in that world, especially.
Yeah.
All right. So that sounds like.
So big. I'd say the two big lessons is wisely choose your investors. Make sure that you have the right vision for the business. The same goals, the same vision, the same perspective, and I think we took the money where it was, rather than taking the money where we should have taken it, strategically, and surrounding yourself, not only surrounding yourself with the good advisors, but making sure that we source the information at the right time and listen to what people have to say, people that have the experience. So a lot of lessons we learned. I mean, it's just two of them, but we learned so much with that company. And a lot of things have happened since. Yeah.
So and just to close that last part off, what happened directly after when you sold the company? You didn't make what you wanted to make from it. Like, just take me back to that moment of like your life, your personal life. Like
I was completely devastated. I had invested everything, and all my relationships, and the world kind of fell apart because my life was my company, which is different today. That's a family great and everything, okay. So that's different subject. But my life was the company, and when that happened, everything fell apart, and I I needed to revenge myself, and to revenge, I started something else.
Okay, that's how you bounced out of it.
Yeah, that's how I bounced out of it, and I needed to get myself busy and find myself doing something else, not to feel that I was completely, completely abused or completely. I'm missing the right terms, but I felt that I did not exist anymore, because that business was my way to exist at that point of time. Everything was surrounding around the business, and I think that's the fact. That's the situation for a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of people that work 200% of your time. If that company goes away, who are you? And it's actually sad for me to to admit that today, because I was living only through my business, and it forced me to actually start another business right away, too fast.
Would you have taken a break? Like looking back, should you have done
big time? I would have taken a break, of course, and that was a huge mistake to actually start a business right away, right after, and not being able to to actually step back and reflect on myself and actually take a good some time to really think about what I would really wanted to do, and that eventually happened a few months later. But
that you took the time out.
I took a little time out. I went away.
What'd you do, man?
I went to Costa Rica. I went surfing for a month. Because
you're a big you love surfing.
I love surfing. Yeah, but that's what I should have done right away, rather than thinking that I needed to prove to myself, to prove to the rest of the world that I still exist, and I'm still doing something that actually is going to provide value to the ecosystem I was a part of, and I still deserve to be a part of that ecosystem. It's like it's your ego that's just talking.
That's it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just your ego is too big to be to be put down, and I needed to prove myself something and prove something to the rest of the world, and things hopefully have evolved differently since then, and now I can step back and I can talk freely about it without without being too
If we were doing this 10 years ago, how would you react if I had asked you those questions? Would you have been like, I don't want to?
I wouldn't have talked about it the same way. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't have just
agreed to do this.
Agreed to no. I wouldn't have to told you the real story and the egomaniac issue that are related to being an entrepreneur as well, and those things that you have to prove to yourself all the time.
How did you overcome your ego over time? Like, how have you become?
I didn't say I did.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
No, I think hopefully we're getting better with experience, with age, with many different things. By becoming a father as well, I think it helped me a lot, becoming a better person.
Because you're forced to have to not think about someone that isn't you.
Exactly. You're forced to think not about you first, but about everybody else, which is great and very refreshing. And And so it allows me to have that very different conversation today.
If you don't mind me asking, the Costa Rica thing. So like this is,
you have to come. Let's go together. I'm doing one trip a year at least with a bunch of friends.
I've never surfed, but I will try my best. But yeah,
perfect place to learn.
That's great.
Yeah.
And if anyone's not watching on YouTube, you should definitely come on. We can find a timestamp in a minute and put it in the notes. But when I just said Costa Rica, your face lit up. Right, and that's like so nice to see, because for someone 10 years ago, comparing yourself to that person, again, I'm sure there's so many good qualities in you in that way, but it was so focused on work, all about the business. And when I said Costa Rica, you're like, oh man, it's like paradise, or whatever it feels like to you. And I feel like just knowing you over the last few years, you found balance in a different way. And I think that's something everyone really struggles with, especially people that have and start their own companies or self-employed, because you're pretty much working all the time, a lot of the time, and like you said, it's such a big part of your identity that you don't necessarily find a way to do otherwise. So
And we both know that because you changed your lifestyle a lot the past few years. Right? And you found your balance too.
Exactly, yeah. And it's still definitely evolving, but you're right. Yeah, it's like when we met, I worked at Google. I was happy enough, but just like very kind of coasting, to be honest. I could do my job fairly easily. Wait, I've told this story before. I don't know if I've said it on this podcast, but it's quite embarrassing to admit. But there was and it's straight up hashtag first world problems, right? But I remember the time I clicked and I was like, oh my God, I need to be shaken up. Like I'd been at Google maybe like 6-7 years at that point, and I came up to my desk and I just had sushi for lunch for free in the cafeteria, right? Like amazing food there.
I remember.
You've come several times. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's where we met. And and I remember complaining about sushi, and I feel so embarrassed to say that. But like I literally came to my desk, I was like, oh man, they had salmon sushi, and I was like, what is wrong with me, man? Like I just realized like that is at that particular moment, my life had become comfort on another level. Like I was overweight, unfit, just living for stuff outside of work, going out with my friends, you know, all the trappings of a New York life change. Or city life. Yeah, and I just was essentially scared to do anything else. And it's not like I wasn't doing anything. I was still like active and doing, you know, like stuff outside of work and all that sort of stuff, and doing fine in my job. But just it wasn't the right thing. I should have left. And that was the time when I was like, oh my God. Like if you told me 10 years before that I would first of all even like sushi, let alone be complaining about sushi, that is like I would have slapped myself in the face, you know, because I would have said like, look at your, you know, look at where you've come from, look at your family, look at how you've been brought up. I've not been brought up to be a spoiled brat like that, right? Like my parents did a lot better job than that. So, and that was the moment where I was like, all right, I need to make a change. And actually that's kind of what sparked the podcast, was what sparked a lot of my own personal change, because I couldn't like leave my job straight away. First of all, I didn't have a green card back then, so I actually couldn't leave my job. But I needed to find an outlet, and that's kind of like for someone who's, not to say that I've worked it all out, but for someone who's listening to this who wants to make a change, that's one thing I would say is like, maybe you can't leave your job, maybe you can't quit and go to Costa Rica for a month at the moment. But what you can do is you can have a think, take a step back and figure out what are the things I can be doing outside of work, and that will hopefully flourish into something else. So so you're in Costa Rica. What you're obviously surfing, chilling out, having a good time, but you were obviously reflecting too. So what were the things you were trying to figure out at that moment?
Well, you know, I already had made the step of creating a new business. So
that was Spark Labs.
Spark Labs.
Yeah.
I had created Spark Labs right after Totsy.
Yeah, and that was a co-working business. Is that how you describe it?
Yeah, it's co-working / incubator, helping tech companies from Europe to land into the US. Yeah. So that was the concept, right? And you know, I started this very quickly. I took over the workspace. I took over actually a photo studio, a fashion photo studio, and transformed it into a co-working space. And everything happened really fast.
Yeah.
And
this is in Union Square.
This is in Union Square.
Yeah, same one. Yeah.
And it happened really fast. It filled up pretty fast. You know, European entrepreneurs left and right from like 15 different countries, and it's been running for 5 years, and now I eventually created a second space in Bryant Park, and beautiful space, yeah, big space, and I recently sold that space, and I'm selling the Union Square space as well right now, in order to focus on the new business of Flex. But so back to that, so the reflection in Costa Rica happened like maybe 4 or 5 months after I created Spark Labs. So I had already something on my lap. Not that was preventing me from having the reflection, but the reflection was limited by
what you were doing,
what I was doing already.
And just to ask a tactical question, but if you had already started 4 or 5 months in and you went for a month, what happened to the business while you were gone? Was
I had some people, some partners in the
okay,
business.
so they were looking
yeah.
at, and you said to them, "Look, I need to take a break."
And I was working from there. I mean, there is
Yeah.
only 1 hour, 1 hour difference, so
Oh,
I was
okay.
able to do calls and everything.
Oh, okay. So you were still kind of working from
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay. Sorry, I thought you literally just
conference call,
unplugged.
surfing.
Sound like good life, man. Okay, so that Spark Labs. First of all, thanks for sharing that, man. I think it's really important, and just to know like what it takes to go through challenges, right? And not just in business, but in general life. Like everyone has those down moments, and that's kind of what I'm trying to take out of this: is that you can be in the worst place. You can be. Were you single at the time, or were you in a relationship? You were married.
I was married
and then
when
you
I was
got
at Totsy,
divorced
and then I got divorced after
that.
Totsy.
Okay, so it was also,
So it kind of contributed to a lot of different things.
and that all happened basically at the same time. So it's kind of like
within the year.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So just like, I'm just talking from personal experience. I'm not trying to compare, but like I definitely have not been in that situation. But I've had my own moments, and someone listening to this has had their moments where they've been really down, and like getting out of that is hard sometimes, and you need a hand, you need friends. You can't do it on your own most of the time, and often the people that try to do it on their own, it's quite hard to do, so you don't always succeed in that way. But are there things that really helped you apart from just going away? Like what were the things that helped you to get out of that rut for you?
Some things work out, some things don't. When I created Totsy, it worked out very quickly, which allowed us to have that stellar growth. It just worked. The economics worked. The customer promise worked. People came in by thousands, tens of thousands. That deal didn't work, and then I created Spark Labs, and Spark Labs just worked right away. Just right away. And it's, when things work, it's just magical. Right?
Yeah.
It's just magical. Things worked. And I created an environment with Spark Labs where, people were helping each other. It was just a positive environment. It just made sense. And it felt good to be putting together something where I was not spending, 6 hours a day on spreadsheets, but just talking to people and exchanging with people.
Building a community.
And building a community of European guys with very weird accents, and just helping all these guys figure things out. And honestly, it was never a big business. It became a multi-million-dollar business, but not a very, very long business.
But that's
and at some point, 4 years into Spark Labs, couple of spaces, 500 members, a small community of people, profitable business. Didn't raise money.
You never raised money?
No, I never raised money. I did a joint venture on the second space with a corporate partner, but I never raised equity.
All right. So did you raise debt or something? Like
No.
You just funded it yourself?
I funded it myself, and then we did a joint venture on the second space where they brought some equity and other things, but. So very efficient business, but 4 years in, I started missing, creating a business that could grow and scale,
like a scalable one,
scalable one, just like Totsy, with now a lot more experience, a real step back, time to think about what I really wanted to do, and also. And also, I had someone in my life that was making my life a lot more balanced. A woman who became the mother of my child, and my child who brought a lot of beautiful things, amazing things into both our lives, and I felt at peace. I felt at ease to build something and to do it well, to do it right with the right people. I teamed up with a wonderful woman who is my business partner. Who's our chief product officer at Flex, and we created Flex together.
What's her name again?
Her name is Ginger.
Ginger, yeah. Where does she come from? What was her?
And she's Canadian. She's from Malaysia originally, but she grew up in.
What
Canada.
was her work background like?
She's got 15 years of experience building products, web, mobile, also devices. and she's got a very good background at managing product development roadmaps and engineers, and she's a very good person, and she's very good with managing people too.
Yeah. So I want to talk about Upflex in a second in more detail, but you mentioned your daughter there. So you mentioned and you're smiling again, which is great to see. That night before, when we had that dinner, it was actually, I'm pretty sure, and I could be wrong, it was definitely the last time I saw you before you had your daughter, but I'm pretty sure you had a daughter. Was she born early?
She was no.
Slightly,
she was
okay.
no. She was born pretty much on time. At the end of January 10th.
It was around. It was like you were that night. I remember us basically saying any moment now.
Any moment
it could have been any
so
time.
it was in January 2017 that dinner.
Okay, that's it. Okay, yeah. So that's when it was. So, and talk to me about how that has changed your perspective, because you just talked about how you have more joy, you see things differently, but like, how has that brought a change to your own personal life?
Well, being a New Yorker, I think, New Yorkers listening to these guys from New York single. When you're a single guy in New York, you live a little bit selfishly, and you have all those, the agenda that you have is about the nightlife and parties and restaurants and friends and events left and right, and you're never home and you're always doing something, etc. That changes dramatically when you have a child. And it changed the entire dynamic about our couple. It changed the entire dynamic about the responsibilities you may have, and I think it brought a lot of positive alignment for me as a person, and as an entrepreneur. It allowed me to be even more organized.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how does that
even
impact
more organized
compared to the Christophe from 10 years ago, where you were working crazy hours all the time? Like, how do you balance that now? Because a lot of people listening to this have families already, or they want to have in the future, and they also want to have the freedom and flexibility of creating something themselves. That's the essence of the show, is to do that. But balancing that, often people don't take the leap because they have kids. So, and how is it?
Well,
are
I
you
can
just
understand
more
that,
efficient now, or what?
this is well. It's everybody has a different style as well of building a business and or not building a business, and I now relate a lot more with my friends that have been creating businesses and had kids, and I didn't have kids. And I understand now that it's very, very different. It's a very different experience when you have kids, and it's very interesting, because when you're single, you work hard and you party hard.
Yeah.
And when you become a dad, you wake up very, very early.
So you can't do that.
So you actually have a lot more time in a way, because you're just earlier at the office and you're in before everybody. You arrive earlier, you leave earlier to take care of your kids too. But I think it's a lot better lifestyle for an entrepreneur.
That's I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, well, but it depends on your personality. I loved being out and being with people. If you love being out and being with people and you want to build a business, well, the days are going to be very long. If you are more of if you're less of a social person, and you can be very, very focused and spend hours and hours and hours in the office, which was not my case. I needed to be out, I needed to meet people, I needed to do things. It's a different dynamic.
Man, I wish I met you 10 years ago, man. No, I like that I know you now, but just to see that side of you as well, it seems like just knowing you now, how you've grown as a person, it would have been good to see the comparison. But no, I love that, man. Thanks for sharing that about your daughter. I do want to go into a little bit about Upflex. So, talk to me about the new company, what you're working on, and really what I'm curious about is the kind of hypothesis of the startup, and what the market looks like for you, and why you're choosing to focus on it. What were the things that you brought together and said, I'm seeing this trend, I see a need, and I want to create this solution?
By managing Spark Labs, by owning and managing Spark Labs, managing a workspace, big problem for all workspaces, all co-working spaces, unless you've raised hundreds or billions of dollars, which is the case of a few companies but not many, is customer acquisition, like many other businesses. Acquiring customers is expensive, and the more companies are raising money in your local market, and the higher the cost of acquisition is going to be. So we try to figure out a way for workspaces to acquire users and acquire customers when local companies like WeWork, like Notel, like Industrious and other large players are raising hundreds of millions of dollars and getting the cost of acquisition of customers through the roof if you're using the same channels.
Meaning Facebook, Google.
All those channels.
Yeah. Because
Exactly.
it's an auction and
it's
therefore the price
It's impossible. You can't fight. So, which is why a lot of the co-working spaces in New York, for example, to take that city as an example, have been wiped away.
Or they sell to one of the bigger players.
They couldn't afford to acquire customers anymore. And so we tried to take that on as a use case. Can we create something efficient? And that's the first idea behind Upflex. We tried to do that, and by doing a lot of research, we figured very quickly that the market was actually different. The market was to not become a customer acquisition tool for co-working spaces, but actually to provide a flexibility tool to employers. A lot of employers, all employers now, should they want to acquire and retain talents today and tomorrow, are going to need to provide flexibility to their employees. And providing flexibility to their employees, that's the big macro trend that shows that today, about 40 million people in the US alone, just in the US, are commuting more than an hour and a half every day.
40 million?
40. And that's growing. And then that needs to stop. To everybody talks about future of work. This is the new future of work trend. What is future of work? It's, all the technologies that are being developed around the work vertical. We don't believe at Upflex that the future of work includes commute. The commuting has to stop. The commuting makes people crazy. The commuting makes people, sad. It's not efficient. It's not efficient for anybody. And it's not sustainable either. It's creating, a lot of pollution problems in every single big city in the US and around the world. So we're trying to create, with Upflex, kind of an Airbnb of workspace. We've been aggregating and federating thousands of co-working spaces across the world. We have about 4,000 of them already, and we're adding over 100 workspaces every month. And we put them under one umbrella, which allows for employers to become members of Upflex via a SaaS membership based on the number of employees, which allows for that employer to provide its employees with access to a mobile app that's free for the employees to use, prepaid by the employer, and allowing the employees to actually use any of those workspaces based on a consumption that would have been pre-approved and prepaid by the employer.
Love that. So what I love about that is you're going after not, WeWork, anyone who, if you don't mind me comparing directly, it's just like, if I'm an independent, like right now, I'm essentially an independent business person. If I want to join a co-working place and I'm paying myself, my budget is slightly less than a company who wants to give this as a benefit. Right, I'm assuming, but
it's true.
And the need is different, right? So the people, like if I'm Google or Microsoft or whoever, and I want to give my employees a day a week they're allowed to work flexibly from home, this is a good alternative to just saying work from home or come to the office. Is that kind of what it is?
That's the idea. That's the idea. The idea is that right now, the companies that provide the ability for employees to work remotely, those employees work from home, most of them. But working from home, based on a lot of research, show that it's actually not productive. It's lonely. people tend to want to be a part of a community. People tend to want to be connecting with other people. People tend to feel they flourish if they are embracing new, embracing new encounters. So we're creating a solution which allows for the employers to reduce their cost of real estate by not having to pay the full desk price for a desk that's going to be used maybe 1 day a week, as you just mentioned, to pay per hour or per day, which is something that most of the co-working spaces don't do. So we provide the co-working spaces with that billing, that technology platform to be able to charge per day, to charge per hour using our platform, and we allow the employer to be able to have, through one relationship with Upflex, access to all the vendors of co-working, because if those employers want to provide that solution to all the employees, they need a co-working space wherever the employees are. So you need pretty much all the co-working on the platform in order to make sure everyone's happy and everyone's provided with a workspace close to home. So we first went through, after all the co-working spaces, we're working with most co-working brands. Not all of them yet. A lot of the large ones don't really understand why they would need to work with us, but they are getting there. They are starting to understand that it's actually, the number of workspaces and the capacity to provide a workspace in tier 2 and tier 3 cities where the employees actually live is very important, not only their workspaces.
So are you competing with, let's say, someone like a Breather, who Breather allows you to book conference rooms and office space on demand, but not co-working spaces? Are you seeing use cases is there an overlap in use cases between
There is a little bit of overlap with Breather. The big difference is that we are an asset-light model, so we have 0 workspace, 0 leases. We are 100% software. We're a marketplace model, so we onboard workspaces that match our requirements. And that's how we can have hundreds, thousands of them on the platform, where a Breather is taking on leases.
Because they lease their own spaces.
They lease their own spaces, which limits the number of cities and number of spaces they can have. Now, in terms of user experience, so that was for the model. In terms of user experience, we do overlap with them because we also provide meeting rooms by the hour on our platform. But we have 100 times more than they have.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. But they are a much more, installed company.
Yeah. I love the concept, and I think there's a need for it. And who are your main customers now? Like the people that are choosing to join this sort of platform, are they like what? If you're able to share names, or just the types of companies or individuals?
So I can share types of companies. We're working really towards onboarding companies that are anywhere between 10 and 500 employees right now. That's the SMB segment we're going after. In all the major cities in New York City, in all the major cities in the US, sorry, and mostly technology and forward-thinking companies that are pretty savvy in terms of technology.
Great. And have you had to raise money for this?
We raised a pre-seed round of $1.5 million last year.
$1.5 million.
$1.5 million in pre-seed money from business angels and very early stage VC funds.
Yeah. I want to ask, because we talked about the learnings from the earlier businesses. Like, how did you approach raising money this time versus last time? Did you go back to some of the old investors? Are there any follow?
No, here we've been working with angel investors that have expertise in the HR tech, so understanding flexibility of employees, that have expertise in real estate. And some early stage VCs from the West Coast that are interested in the future of work.
Well, listen, man, I love what you guys are doing. I love that you've done so many different things, from mobile agency world to Totsy, what you did there, and co-working space, and now going back to software as a service, or you're calling it workplace as a service, which
Yeah,
I really
it
love,
is.
by the way. That's
Yep.
great.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I don't know if that's like a common term or you guys kind of made that.
There is a few companies using that
I
term
like that
already,
term.
yeah,
I like
yeah,
it. But listen, man, I think there's so much to take from this conversation, and I really appreciate how honest and real you've been to share your story and to share what you're doing. I love the concept of Upflex. I think there's definitely a need for it, and I think there's going to be great things for you to come down the line, even more so. So thanks for sharing, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Pleasure, man.
I want to make sure you got enough time to go pick up your daughter, which you've got to do after this. Cheers, brother. Appreciate this. Thanks, man.